Without it, I go through withdrawal. 'Cause nothing even matters at all. Nothing even matters. Nothing even matters. Nothing even matters. Nothing even matters.
These buildings can drift out to sea, a natural catastrophe, but there's no place I'd rather be, 'cause nothing even matters to me. Nothing even matters. Nothing even matters. Nothing even matters.
You're part of my identity. I sometimes have a tendency to look at you religiously, 'cause nothing even matters to me.
Time for manicures. With you it's never neither one. 'Cause nothing even matters. Nothing even matters. Nothing even matters at all. Nothing even matters.
Now my team could score and make it to the final four. Just repossess me 4x4. Yeah, 'cause nothing even matters no more. Nothing even matters, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Nothing even matters to me.
WIFTBPM.
Live from What's in It for the Black Media Studio.
The problem in the past has been the man turning us against one another.
Take a journey with Salim.
Come with me into Muwakkil'S world.
We have been unable to see the truth because we have been fighting for 10 square feet of ground.
It's Muwakkil'S world.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
Here's Salim.
Greetings, family. I am Salim Muwakkil, and I welcome you to Muwakkil'S world on this warming Wednesday, March 24th. Today, we'll be talking to some folks whose names have been high in the national news these days as Americans' interest has turned to Evanston, Illinois, which Monday became the first American city to offer reparations money to Black Americans, to Black residents whose families have suffered lasting damage from decades of discriminatory practices. So today I'll be talking to Sister Alderman Robin Bruce Simmons. That's the sister who spearheaded this really path-breaking issue, this path-breaking effort to force or to convince this university town to the north to accede to this request. And we're also going to be talking to Brother Cam Howard, who's the national co-chair of NCOBRA, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. It's an organization really that's been long in the struggle for reparations and is very familiar with many aspects of this struggle and can help place much of this effort in Evanston into perspective. So we'll try to address many of the questions that have been raised about this path-breaking piece of municipal legislation. And so stay tuned and share the broadcast with those who may have an interest in this very important subject, because we're going to try to pierce the veil and, get down to what's really important in this thing. So welcome, Brother Cam, and welcome, Sister Simmons. How you doing? How you folks doing? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Cam,
perfect.
Cam, are you there?
I am, Brother Salim. Thanks again, brother, for reaching out to us. It's always a pleasure.
Hey, man, this is an extremely important issue. It portends much for our community, and a lot of people are looking at it for many reasons. So let's start out just in an elementary way and get an understanding, Sister Simmons, on how did you come up with this idea, and more importantly, how did you convince the city council to go along with it? Because I think that's really the important thing. How compelling was the argument for reparations?
Thank you for the question. So we know it's not a novel idea, and it is one of justice and repair that is overdue in our city in Evanston and in this nation. So I came to the idea of localizing it because, like many other American cities, we had not done enough to bridge the divide, to redress the impact, the disparate impact in the Black community, the crimes against our humanity, anti-Blackness. We had not done enough and will not be able to do enough with ordinary public policy and equity and inclusion programming to bridge the gap and bring repair to our communities. So the introduction was very basic. This is our history that we have acknowledged in Evanston. We have acknowledged our anti-Blackness, how it has damaged the community, our disparate conditions in the Black community, our commitment to doing better. And what we've done in the past has not been enough. And we need to do something radically different. Here is our data. Our data shows a $46,000 income divide between Black and white Evanston. It shows a 13-year life expectancy difference. It shows a education gap and so on. We need to do better. And if we don't do something radically different, then all of these resolutions and ceremonies on our commitment to the Black community and Black Lives Matter is quite frankly insulting. And it's making a mockery of our community. And reparations are in order. Reparations are overdue. And let's advance reparations now. We passed it with an 8-1 vote in November of 2019. And we just passed it again with an 8-1 vote for our first remedy policy implementation and disbursement on this past Monday.
How many Black council people were involved in that vote?
We have 3 on the city council. There were 2 in support, and one surprisingly voted not in support. That supported the original resolution. And we were all surprised to hear her change of heart because her recommendations included the very exact policies that we have introduced. So we have 3 aldermen. There are 9 total in Evanston, and we had 1 vote no, and that was a Black woman.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. Just as a sidelight, what was the essence of her opposition?
It's not enough community participation, not enough stakeholder participation. These were her comments, and that it was not reparations. And our response to that is simply, as you know, brother, we passed this in 2019. And so before we passed it in November of 2019, we had 15 public meetings, community meetings, with large stakeholder voices lifted up. And our direction was the summary of the collective direction from the community, the stakeholder community.
I think that's important. That's important to note.
It's very important. And then since that time, we've had a public process since 2019 that included subcommittee meetings that have been open to the public. Stakeholders have come out to contribute, and she is the only councilwoman that has not participated at all in our process since 2019. So we were surprised to hear her new position, but glad that it did not stop progress in Evanston towards repair and justice for the Black community.
And who decides the eligibility process? How is that decided?
The eligibility process?
Who's eligible for the reparations?
Absolutely. So our case for reparations is very specific to our city and the specific local legislation that was enforced. In 1919 to 1969, we had anti-Black housing policies that restricted Black residents to living in one corridor of our community, the 5th Ward of Evanston. And that same neighborhood was disinvested in, disenfranchised. We were stripped of community amenities that we should have, including a neighborhood school that we still do not have today in 2021. So the eligibility is based on our purview and our enforcement of anti-Blackness, and that's 1919 to 1969, and direct descendants of those that lived there during that time period.
Okay, and I suspect that that's one of the issues that people have raised pretty significantly is how do you determine how people are eligible?
Not so much. That's not been, we haven't had much pushback on that. It's clear on our history in Evanston, and those are the eligibility requirements.
Okay, so this sister who is against the ordinance because of its lack of a completeness. I think that's probably how you could describe her opposition. Is not complete enough. It's not comprehensive enough. Is that where she's coming from?
Her opposition I can't pin it down completely, but to that point, it's not complete enough, and it is not enough. $25,000 to Black residents is not enough. Housing remedy redress is not enough. $10 million is not enough. It's the first step. It is a process. It is a 10-year program. And my belief is that it will continue beyond 10 years into perpetuity. So I agree with her and any critic that says it's not enough. It's also not full repair. It is, however, reparations, and it is the first step towards full repair, understanding that there are many accomplices that need to join the commitment to reparations: the financial institutions, our educational systems, corporations, major foundations, HR 40, the state of Illinois. So we understand that we are in a very initial stage of a commitment towards repair and justice in the Black community, that this alone is not full repair. We are committed to that. Our city has supported HR 40 since 2002 with a resolution that was led by
HR 40, of course, is the national attempt to launch a reparations study. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yes. Thank you. So we have supported HR 40, and this is a complement. It is appropriate. It is our responsibility as a municipality to begin working towards our repair and justice and full repair. And this is only our first step. Our first proposal is only allotted $400,000, which is 4% of our $10 million program. So this is a program that has just launched. And with its passing on Monday, we are just weeks away from implementation and dispersing our first $25,000 benefits to Black residents in Evanston.
All right. And it's being funded through cannabis taxes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, which seems to be kind of symmetrical justice there, right?
Absolutely. It's appropriate. In our city, 71% of the marijuana arrests were in the Black community, and we've declined to only 16% of the population now due to lack of a sense of place, lack of affordability, lack of job and business opportunities in our city. So it is appropriate that that revenue is used for nothing else but repair in the Black community. And that's what we committed to in 2019. We've restricted the first $10 million of that fund. The cannabis law went into effect, as we know, in Illinois, January of 2020. We only just received the revenue in November, this past November. So since November, we've begun to receive the tax revenue from the state of Illinois, and we can begin to roll out our programming as we incrementally receive taxes from cannabis. We should also note that our goal is not to limit this to $10 million or to sales tax from cannabis. And we are fortunate to live in a city that has bought into reparations. We have allies that have begun to contribute private donations to our reparation fund. We have businesses that have set aside
any corporate contributions?
Corporate contributions. We have local businesses that have set aside a percentage of their proceeds to go to fund reparations. We have a brewery that has created a product. 100% of the proceeds go to reparations. We have faith-based institutions. We have a synagogue. Jewish Reconstruction Center Synagogue has contributed. The St. Nicholas Catholic Church has contributed. The Evanston Unitarian Church has recently just launched a matching fund for reparations that they will hold in perpetuity. And in addition, our local community foundation has seeded a reparation fund and is holding a reparation funds for the stakeholder community specifically to weigh in and deliberate and determine what is done with that fund. And that fund is growing daily. So we're doing the work. We understand that we're in the early stages and that we have much work ahead of us, but we're committed to doing that work with our important partners like Cobra that has made our momentum possible in educating our community and the city council so that we do understand what full repair is. We do understand what's the potential in a local initiative. And we do understand our role in helping support the advancement of HR 40 as well.
Very good. And speaking of Cobra, Brother Cam, a lot of people were very skeptical of this Evanston effort until they noticed that Cobra was involved. And you gave it kind of the stamp of approval, and that, of course, released others to give them their stamp of approval to this particular effort. So, what convinced you, my brother, that this is a worthy effort and is not the piecemeal kind of diminishment that some people critique it as being?
Well, thank you for that, Salim. Thank you for that question. But it was not only in Cobra. NARC, also National African American Reparations Commission, also gave their stamp of approval. As you may recall, there was a huge town hall meeting where NARC brought in Danny Glover to Evanston, and it was at that point where we began to assess in earnest the process that was taking place in Evanston. And after that time, after that assessment, NARC came out and stated that it was, in fact, a model that should be utilized around the country. But in Cobra, we were actually on the ground in Evanston, assisting the aldermen privately prior to NARC's coming into Evanston. At the same time, the alderman in Evanston was pursuing local reparations. We were pursuing local reparations in Chicago, unbeknownst to either party. that we were pursuing local reparations. So in Cobra, we were working with Dr. Willie Wilson Foundation at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But in Cobra has always seen in our entire history that reparations was due at all structures and levels of the government, state, local, and federal. Local and federal. For instance, Salim, back in 2000, most of our efforts legislatively, a great deal of our efforts legislatively in the early 2000s was around local reparations. It was around getting slavery disclosure ordinance passed around the country that would mandate corporations to contribute into a fund if they wanted to do business in these cities.
With Alderman Dorothy Tillman, you were working with her in that effort, right?
I was not working with her, but Cobra was working with her. I was not in Cobra at that time, but Cobra was definitely working with her.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Anderson Thompson, who was a member of Cobra, Dr. Conrad Worrell, who was on the board of Cobra at that time. They were all working with her, and of course, our ancestor who started the Cobra chapter, Mama Repo, was also on working in that fashion. So we've always held that reparations was due with every form of government. Let me give you another example of that, Salim. In 1898, the 78% of the revenue of the state of Alabama was from convict leasing. So we can say only the federal government. So state governments also have a huge responsibility. Every southern state in America after enslavement used convict leasing, which was slavery by another name. Even Illinois had, convict farms in Illinois. So states have a responsibility. They have engaged in harms against our community. Chicago and local cities have engaged. They've actually administered these state and federal policy that actually harmed us as a community. So there's never been a time in the Cobra's history where we have not seen each branch of government owing to the contributing of our harms and therefore owing to the obligation to repair those harms.
So you don't see any danger of diluting the impact of the national reparations issue by these local efforts, which is also one of the criticisms that, it diminishes the value of the word reparations because, everyone wants to use it for their own particular pet project. And so it really devalues the majesty of this national effort. You don't buy into that.
Absolutely not, Salim. Absolutely not. Because what we have held in working with Evanston and working with what we've been doing here in Chicago and what we're seeing around the country, we know for a fact that limited local resources are not going to, as the Alderman said, not going to engage for repair of our communities. At best, you can apply it towards some limited actions that will begin to what we call triage the situation, stop some of the bleeding out of our communities. But all of that shows in greater strength the need for federal resources. The more local resources are applied toward redress, and they show that they will not, in and of themselves, do the type of repair that's necessary, although they are engaging in some form of repair, necessary repair on a local level. And if in and of itself, it demonstrates that federal resources have to come, and it makes a stronger argument to the federal legislators for that purpose that these resources come through in the form of a federal package. So we see the opposite actually being the case, not diluting, but actually strengthening the argument for federal legislation.
Interesting. Also, the very logic of reparations, the fact that people are being won over to that particular argument is itself an important change in the situation that it was in the past. Many people were simply against the whole concept of reparations. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore.
And we owe a great deal of that change in belief or feelings among local and federal legislators to what happened in Evanston. We had several federal legislators co-sponsor the legislation after the Evanston initiative. And so many legislators across the country, as you know, tons of cities, scores of cities have tried to implement or attempted to implement local legislation, all because of what was done positively in Evanston. So we see that this whole momentum is changing as a result of the actualization of repair in one particular city. And so once that duplicates and replicates around the country, we have a better opportunity of funding the initiatives that comes out of the HR 40 legislation.
Good point, my brother. Good point.
I'd
Sister
like to
Robin.
jump in and
Yeah,
add something. I want to add a quote
I wanted
from
to
the
say,
Congresswoman.
Sister Robin, I wanted
Can
to
you
say
hear
that
me?
yeah, I wanted to say that you are kind of a national path breaker here, and one of the things that you broke a path on, even I think within Cobra, is that you legitimized the notion that reparations are due, even excluding slavery. I mean, there are injuries that we have incurred, that we have damages we have accrued that are way post slavery, and so that argument is very important to make, and you made it well, my sister. Appreciate that.
Thank you. I just want to add that to your point, there has been a lot of misinformation, intentional misinformation and disinformation, conflating very valid points with the goals of HR 40 and chattel enslavement and what we're doing in Evanston. And this is a specific case. This is not a reparation to replace HR 40. It is not a reparation even for chattel enslavement. It's specifically for Evanston's responsibility and its purview. And I just want to add to the voice of Brother Cam Howard on adding the fearless Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who is leading HR 40 currently. And she quoted as saying that the Evanston model is a valuable complement to the effort to achieve federal reparations. She is also stating that this is supporting the momentum and the direction of HR 40. I just wanted to make sure that that's known while people are suggesting that it is damaging the goals of HR 40.
Very good point. Are you familiar with the California effort, Sister Robin?
Yes, I'm learning more about the California effort. Really proud of what Dr. Can't call her name right now, but the leader, the sponsor.
Weber.
Yeah, Weber, thank you. Dr. Weber is doing in California. We understand that it models HR 40 very closely and excited to see that momentum happening.
And Cam, that momentum, you say, has was initiated, or at least was propelled by what was going on in Evanston.
Oh, most definitely. There's been a lot of things that were happening in the national movement prior to Evanston, but certainly the Evanston initiative, again, convinced many legislators who were on the fence that this was something that a justice issue that they needed to be on the right side of. I mean, the history has been, the tide has been turning for a number of years now, and so this is one more effort to get us across the top, get us to that point of being repaired in this country, being redressed in this country. And so,
No, I'm saying we've spoken before, Cam, talking about the way the tide seems to be changing. And again, man, what do you think of the reasons for that? Why do you think we've reached this point? I think Sister Robin alluded to one of the reasons is that data, big data. So much data is coming in, and it's very difficult to refute the accrued disadvantages that African Americans have suffered. But other than that, what do you think is the primary reason for this change in the attitude, Cam?
Well, I think that's the major reason. But also, people are seeing with the explosion of cell phone video, people are seeing the injustices that we have been talking about for decades. For actually hundreds of years. Cobra has always talked about police violence in our community and that terror that exists. We haven't been calling it police brutality for a long time, but we've been addressing it as police terror, which is an international term. And the explosion of these videos, people cannot deny that there's an apartheid system in America when it comes to policing. And if you look across the data in every other instance of Black life and white life, you'll see these disparities as well. Tom Burrell, in his book Brainwash, says that Blacks are on the top of every bad list in America and on the bottom of every good list in America. That shows
Cam, that's a good, that distinction is a very good place to hold up for a minute. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back right after this.
WIFTVPM.
Everybody's talking about the all-new Sam Silk's Chicken and Fish. Place your order today for a delicious meal. The chicken and fish are fried to perfection, featuring a wide variety of catfish, perch, tilapia, whiting, and shrimp. Now it's your turn to see what everybody's talking about. It's the all-new Sam Silk's Chicken and Fish, Chicago's newest spot for delicious meals. Stop by at 2537 South Wabash in the South Loop, or get contactless delivery from DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, and Postmates. For more info, call 773-807-9010, 773-807-9010. Sam Silk's Chicken and Fish is open just in time for lunch, or take it to the house for a delicious dinner. It's Chicago's new spot for perfectly fried chicken and fish. Don't wait any longer. Try it today. Sam Silk's Chicken and Fish, 2537 South Wabash in the South Loop. Sam Silk's Chicken and Fish.
Hey, sunshines. If you didn't catch the last page in the Book of Dawn, here's what you missed. So you found that, but you also, during those times, made a conscious decision to create a base for yourself outside of the Isleys or the great artists that you tour with. And from that, the Mo-Fits Project was born. Can you tell us how and why you did the Mo-Fits Project?
Let me tell you something. I had been touring since I was 17. And what happened was Eve, your girl Eve, was doing different events around town. Mm-hmm. And I remember it was right on 47th Street.
Yeah, I think it was Blue 47.
Yeah, one of those spots. So Eve was doing something with them. So they were like, we're hiring bands. I was like, I'm going to put something together and go play, play local. Let me do that. And through that situation from Eve, the Mo-Fits Project was birthed. I was like, oh, okay, this would be great to actually come home and put quality guys together and make music locally outside of the touring. I just found another joy in it. Mm-hmm. And crazy, remember Terrence Kane came up with the Mo-Fits.
Oh, did he? Kane? Yeah. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Terrence was like, you need to call it the Mo-Fits, Reese. Mo-Fits. Use your name. This is how that name came about. It was Terrence Kane and my girl Each Bridgeworth. She was the launching pad for that, and then she would hire me to do different events, and she started hiring me to do weddings and stuff she was doing, and then it just kind of birthed into that.
Don't forget to tune in weekdays, 9 a.m. to the Book of Dawn from the What's in It for the Black People Media Studios. Roll Tide, y'all.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water, and I think of all the things what you're doing, and in my head I paint a picture. Well, since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. But won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over, Valerie? Did you have to go to jail? Put your house on up for sale? Did you get a good lawyer? I hope you didn't catch a tan. I hope you find the right man who'll fix it for you. And are you shopping anywhere? Change the color of your hair. Are you busy?
And we're back. Salim Muwakkil here in Muwakkil'S World, and I'm joined with Brother Cam Howard and Sister Robin Rue Simmons, Alderman Robin Rue Simmons from the city of Evanston, Illinois, which just passed a very path-breaking piece of legislation. And Sister Robin, what's a little bit of your personal history? I know you have to leave at 12, so I want to get as much out of you as I can before you have to exit. What is a little bit of your personal history? Why are you the one to do this kind of path-breaking stuff?
Right here in the Fifth Ward, the historically Black part of Evanston. I have raised my children here, and I have invested in this community in business and in ownership. My story is one of the village here. I lived in this area that was restricted, but I'll tell you, it was a very rich and vibrant village experience. And it wasn't until I grew into the Evanston public school system that I realized exactly how segregated economically and racially we were as a city. So personally, I have led and pursued business opportunities to uplift and empower the Black community. I've been an advocate for Black businesses. As a business owner myself, I have been committed to employing local and neighborhood business people and tradespeople. So personally, I'm committed to this because I want to see my village lifted up. I want to see my village in Evanston enjoy the same lived experience as our white neighbors here in this community. And I want us to stop celebrating our diversity on the backs and at the disadvantages of the Black community, because we do have the diverse numbers, but we are still absolutely a segregated city. We have.
What do you mean by celebrating diversity on the backs of the Black community? Give us.
Well, what I mean by that is we're diverse in the school systems. That's where we all filter into. But that diversity even comes at the disadvantage of our children that don't have a neighborhood school, that spend more time of their day being bused to various schools in the city for us to meet our diversity goals. So that not only comes with in-class learning loss, it doesn't have the same sense of community. We also have environmental injustices in our community because of the extreme busing that no other neighborhoods have, where they're able to walk their children to school. So we have this sort of brand of diversity and wellness and this welcoming city, which we have that on paper and in resolution, but we still have the disparities. We still have $46,000 household income divide. We still have intentionally disinvested neighborhoods, disenfranchisement. We have less amenities. We have poorer infrastructure. We have poorer, inferior housing stock. We have smaller streets. We have less mature trees. We don't have the same environmental assets. We don't have the same access to education in the marketplaces here in this community. So we are celebrating our diversity without lifting up the community that is making us diverse. We are the community that makes us the diverse city that we brand ourselves as. So it was important that we put some budget behind it, not just a resolution with no action plan, which I see way too much of, not something ceremonial. A budget for a municipal government is a moral document. And until there is dollars set aside to plan and execute something that is measurable for repair, it is not enough. Anything less is insufficient. That's a little bit about my background, but I'm personally driven. I didn't come into my public office planning to pursue reparations. I had really not thought about it beyond supporting HR 40. But in my legislative role, I was there elected as a Black woman that overcame the barriers to home ownership, the barriers to being low income, the barriers to being a woman in business and trying to access capital and having to bootstrap it because I could not get financing. I knew firsthand that we were not doing enough in public policy. There were not enough programming, that we could not bootstrap our way out of this condition that this nation has created for the Black community.
Yes, ma'am. And one of the things that's interesting is that you came to this conclusion after just seeing the obvious conditions of your community. You didn't really need any serious kind of convincing, right? I mean,
not at all.
Ideological convincing.
No, not at all. It was the only next step. It was the only next option. Anything more had proven insufficient already. So when you asked about how did I come up with it, it wasn't novel. It was the goals of repair and injustice we're acknowledging these are crimes against our humanity. We needed to do something reparative, targeted, directed specifically for the Black community, not for the diverse community, which includes many important marginalized groups, but we needed to be unapologetic, and we needed to do something specifically and targeted for our community, as we had stated we were committed to. We had passed over 100 resolutions, including one earlier that summer to end structural racism. We had passed over 100 resolutions that said Black Lives Matter, we're committed to, Black equality, diversity, and inclusion, and not anything with any sort of tangible benefit that could create a measurable outcome to help us get to the things that we say that we value. And this was a legislative tool that had been discussed on a federal level that I didn't know hadn't been discussed on a local level. I actually sought out support from other localities to find a template that they may have used. So I only found out in our process that we were the first. I was not aware. And I'm glad to learn that we are inspiring other cities, but I'm really glad to see other cities. I can't wait to see what's happening in Chicago. Really, really excited for the commission and the work that Cam Howard has inspired, Dr. Willie Wilson has funded, and Alderman Sawyer and Alderman Coleman are leading now. Excited to see what's happening there and in other cities across the country. But reparations should be happening at every form of government.
Yes, ma'am. So some of the criticism of your effort, of course, is that it is focusing on housing, and a lot of people don't have houses or whatnot. But as you say, you conducted several town hall meetings and other kinds of gatherings to distinguish what people, to discern what people thought was the best way to respond to this, or what was the best way to apply resources to help repair the damage. And that conclusion was this housing effort. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. That's correct. This was a general consensus of the stakeholder community. The first proposal. One thing that I want to stress is this: we're not settled. This policy is not a settlement. This is the first step. And then I want to also acknowledge everybody for being right. The banks are responsible. We should have, cash. We should have HR 40. We should have access to education. All of the above is correct. But to move a legislation,
did that come up in the discussions about the options, the options that Evanston?
We had dozens of recommendations, and what we did was we looked at the consensus, which was on housing, and then we also had to very importantly look at what's in our purview. We are the city of Evanston. Certain things we don't have any governance over. We can't govern federal taxes. We can't govern. We have a school district that should be governing their own reparation work. We are doing what is within our purview. We are doing what is in line with what the stakeholder community prioritizes.
How do you respond to those who say that this specific effort toward a specific group is unconstitutional and won't withstand constitutional muster?
Well, thanks to Cam Howard and his leadership, along with our brilliant law department and now other institutional law departments, we have a solid case, legal case, and we are performing our responsibility within our home rule municipality, right? And we're ready to stand up to any legal challenge that might come from our resolution.
All right, Brother Cam, how do you respond to that unconstitutional charge?
Well, the Constitution, what the right wing groups are hinging on is this whole notion that race and the national origin based legislation is, unconstitutional. That you can't craft any race based legislation. So we're looking at. The international community has determined a group of people internationally known as people of African descent. And people of African descent just so happen to be from the African continent. I'm sorry. But they went through their ancestors went through a long, atrocious, horrendous period of kidnapping, being transported away from their homeland, taken to another land, forced into hundreds of years of labor with the most unimaginable human horrors that they had to endure while their labor was being extracted. Then they came out of that period and went through another period of apartheid, another period of criminal actions perpetrated against them. And today, people of African descent around the world have these disparate living conditions than other people in their wherever they live. And so that group has been identified as having gross harms committed against them. And so our argument is not a race-based argument, but a harm-based argument. We are people of African descent who were enslaved in the United States. The United States was the injuring party. The group that was harmed were, people of African descent. The fact that we're all of one race, that's not the dominant
That's
issue.
not the determining factor.
That's not the determining factor. The determining factor is the history of harm. And so that race-based arguments would say that no people anywhere on the planet who's been abused by their government, if they only have one race, they can't bring a case against their government. That argument is unconstitutional. And as the Alderman stated, we have Howard University's Thurgood Marshall Law Center, who are a leading partner with the Evanston Law Department. We have the Columbia University Institute of Human Rights, which is a leading partner, law partner, that we brought in for Evanston. We have the African American Redress Network, the U.S. African American Redress Network, which is a collaboration with Howard University and Columbia University, who is a partner with the Evanston law firm. We have the ACLU law firm organization, who also stated that they will contribute to the Evanston initiative if there's constitutional challenge. We are prepared for this fight. We knew it was going to come. We're not operating from a weak position, Salim. This is a historical fight. We've been fighting this fight for 400 years.
Yes, sir.
And to get to this point and lay down, brother, that's not who we are.
It's interesting. I mean, because that would seem to be a pretty insurmountable barrier if there are objections or ways to stop any kind of race-based justice claim, because this is you can say it is a race-based justice claim, but your position is that it's a harms-based justice claim, which completely changes the complexion of the issue in a very interesting, way.
That's the basis in which the legal team is prepared to argue. And there's some other things legally that they also have. As the Alderman stated, that city can determine the type of policy it wants to create. And so we're prepared for that challenge when it happens. And again, we're not operating from a position of weakness.
Alderman Simmons, has that particular challenge been issued to the Evanston City Council, the unconstitutional?
So we actually did have a letter. It's not a lawsuit, but we did have a letter challenging the legality of our reparation commitment. And to that, with the direction of Cam Howard, and as he mentioned, Howard Law School and Columbia Law School, the African American Redress Network, they have responded in support and on our behalf that, in fact, it is, and that they are prepared to give the city of Evanston any support needed to defend the case. So it's been our only official correspondence of a legal challenge that we expected. We expected that we would smoke out the conservative funded efforts and groups and other agent type groups that are working against our efforts when we got close to disbursement. That we passed this in 2019. So we predicted this, and we were very well prepared for this challenge. And I just can't thank Cobra and NARC enough for giving our city the legal capacity needed to deal with our legislation.
Alderman, this is reparations has always been kind of a radical edged policy, you know, many consider it like a kind of a boutique issue of black nationalism, of black nationalist cultists and whatnot. I mean, that's how it's often been portrayed. Were you surprised by the positive reception you received when you made this particular presentation?
I wasn't surprised in Evanston because I know who we are and I know the things that we value. And I presented it as a action plan to complement the things we say that we value. So if we didn't support it in the way it was presented, then it would mean we had no integrity in the things that we say that we value. So I was not surprised in Evanston. I am pleasantly surprised in the national and even international support that we are receiving far and wide in our first step and how it is inspiring other leaders and other institutions to advance reparations.
Give us an example of some of the international support. Where have you received some international support?
Well, we know that Sister Dreeshen, and I don't know her last name, Dreeshen Hurst, I think, of Human Rights Watch, is a supporter of our local initiative and, of course, HR 40 as well. And in this week alone, we've had media outlets and organizations from Russia, Japan, Paris, London, Ireland to come out and highlight and lift up and celebrate the first steps that we've taken here in Evanston on behalf of, you know, the African diaspora. Of course, this is specific to Evanston, but it was exciting for the global initiative for repair for people of African descent.
Yeah, I know you got glowing reports in the UK in the Guardian, for example. I mean, it was
oh, right. Mm-hmm.
You know, gushing kind of support that you've received. A lot of people, I think, agree with this argument of reparations, and some say, "Wow, it's amazing that it took so long for this argument to penetrate into the American consciousness."
Yeah, you know, it is amazing that it took so long, but we're here now. I'll get caught up in you know, grievances and being disgruntled if I think about why it's taken so long. We're here now, and I think that we should just build on the momentum. We should not be divided. We all have the same goal for justice for the Black community, and getting divided in the details and the application and what comes first, I think, is counterproductive to our collective goal to repair and reparations for the Black community in America.
Speaking of that division, and I almost hate to bring this up, but there is opposition from groups like the ADOS community. And have you been responding to that opposition, and do you understand the point that they're making?
So it's been difficult to keep up with their points, because when we initially launched or were working towards local reparations, ADOS, I was not familiar with them, but I was familiar with the hashtag because they were the biggest supporters of the leadership in Evanston towards local reparation. Somewhere they had a shift and they didn't want local reparations. Then it was a shift to, you know, only HR 40 and then only cash payments and non-Black immigrants. And so it's been difficult really to keep up with their argument. And I haven't been responsive to ADOS. And I wish that we could actually figure out a way to work together towards reparations nationally. It seems like their discussion and their argument is more of an HR 40 discussion, because I'll say in Evanston, there's no place for anti-Black immigration. There is no place for Black voter suppression. There is no place for division amongst the Black community. And that's a tenet in which I've seen their leadership. And so in our local initiatives, there's just been no place for it. But in terms of, you know, it's not enough, agree with that. And also stating that it's not a settlement, it's the beginning of our work. Cash payments are due, definitely. Not likely at a local level, possibly, but this again is the beginning of our work. So I want to find more places that I can agree with ADOS and work with them, because we all need to be working together. We don't have enough among us to divide. We need to be working together, supporting one another towards the same goals, finding places that we can agree on. And then those places that we can't agree on, you know, independently building capacity in those areas. The main thing here is we need more funding. in Evanston. We have $10 million. We need 10 times more, 100 times more. So I think more of the argument is, how do we work together to grow the fund? How do we work together to expand the programming? How do we work together to include this initial policy that was a consensus of the community and things that they might like to see? How do we work together? That's what I would love to talk to ADOS about.
All right, Brother Cam, we only have Sister Simmons with us for a little while. Could you respond to I'm sure that you've had a lot of contact or a lot of discussion with the ADOS folks. You understand the source of their gripe. Can you expound a bit on that?
So, initially when the group came out, because they had a great deal of social media presence, and they were utilizing that social media presence to introduce the conversation of reparations into the presidential election. We had a we didn't like the rhetoric, but we had a wait and see type of position. Let's wait and see who they are, what they, really amount to, et cetera, et cetera. So, we were always taken back at the aggressiveness, the division, some of the stands they were taking on Pan-Africanism, et cetera, but that still didn't give us enough to make a position as whether or not to engage them or not. And so we took a non-engagement position, and we held on to that position. There was a report by Sister Jam Iowa, who pointed out their right-wing ties. There was a Harvard report about 2 months ago that looked at a study, looked at millions of their tweets and determined that they were actually engaging in a disinformation campaign, utilizing a number of breaking news, in particular reparations, to put out disinformation, to
what was that study, Cam?
It was a Harvard University study from their Kennedy School of Kennedy's Public Policy Institute.
So we could Google Kennedy School study of ADOS and get it, probably, right?
And you can get it. And they analyzed, again, in the area of big data, they were able to analyze millions of tweets with utilizing the ADOS hashtag. And it was determined that they had an ulterior motive, an anti-Black ulterior motive from the beginning. So now we don't have to wait 10, 15 years to determine whether or not a group or a person, after we 4 years and people died, to determine whether or not they were for or against our community. With big data, we're able to see it much quicker. And that's what this Harvard study did. And as a result, there's been people breaking off away from the ADOS camp. We know, as Alderman Stillman stated, that they were against one thing and then they'll turn around and be for it. But after they put out the disinformation and had people, challenging what it is we were saying and doing, distracting us from the movement, distracting us from the work, attempting to discredit us in their disinformation, taking away from the forward motion of this movement.
Brother Cam,
did that.
Brother Cam, hold up, my brother. I want to really explore this a little bit more completely. You seem to be more effusive than usual, and I want to get you while you're in this mood. But we have to let Sister Simmons go.
For sure.
She wanted to leave us at noon, and we really appreciate you spending this time with us, good sister. I know that you were in great demand internationally, and for you to spend this time with us was extremely, extremely useful and precious. So thank you again.
Thank you. And I will always prioritize us. So thank you.
All right, my sister. Thank you. And we will be back right after this.
WIIFTBPM. WIIFTBP. Media's just for you and me. WIIFTBP. Media's just for you and me.
This is Tori Muhammad, and we want you to tune in to the Tori Muhammad Show that airs here on What's in It for the Black People Media every Monday and Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. We talk and celebrate Black-owned businesses, Black entrepreneurs, and we talk to some of the best people in the food industry here in Chicago, Black chefs, Black restaurateurs. So make sure that you tune in to us every Monday and Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m.
Sissy's Taco Bar Pop-Up is back with more hours and more days. Check them out at their new pop-up location at The Woodlawn, located 1200 East 79th Street. Sissy's Taco Bar offers authentic street tacos infused with international soul. Now every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at The Woodlawn from 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. New vegan tacos have been added to the menu too. Visit sissytacobar.com for more info.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water, and I think of all the things what you're doing, and in my head I paint a picture. Well, since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. But won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over, Did you have to go to jail? Put your house on up for sale. Did you get a good lawyer? I hope you didn't catch a tan. I hope you find the right man who'll fix it for you. And are you shopping anywhere? Change the color of your hair. Are you busy? And did you have to pay that fine that you've been dodging all the time? Are you still dizzy? Oh, yeah. Since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. Won't you come on over? Oh, stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over there?
And we're back. Salim Muwakkil here in Muwakkil'S world. I love that song, y'all. Man, the Sam Trump, path-breaking music, y'all. Man, I mean, he combines, the kind of take six a cappella notion where he's dealing with the instruments as well as the vocal aspects of it, and such an unusual rendition of a cappella singing that is outstanding, unmatched. Sam Trump, y'all. All right, I got brother Cam Howard, another unmatched brother, with us, and we were talking about this dispute with ADOS, and Cam was, you've given me some new information, brother. This Harvard study, I want to really check that out because that would be quite convincing, or at least influential in determining how to look at the ADOS people, because I appreciate the nuance of their argument, and although I've often been a bit distanced or alienated by their aggression, their animosity toward other groups. But still, the logic of where they were coming from was pretty solid. But you say that they've been proven to be an inauthentic force in the community.
That's putting it lightly. I would go as far as say they're agents, man, agents of disruption.
Wow.
The study by, or the paper by Jessica Ann Mitchell, a warrior, it's entitled "Understanding ADOS: The Movement to Hijack Black Identity and Weaken Black Unity." That was in January 2020, and the Harvard study, a year later, January 2021, is entitled "Disinformation Creep: ADOS and the Strategic Weaponization of Black News." And so it's not that they don't have an intent behind what they're doing, what they're saying and doing, what they're tweeting and what they're sharing and what they're putting out. This disinformation, it's clear disinformation. It has a specific intent to disrupt and to distract and to destroy. And so those are the hallmarks of a agent-like force in our community. And so that's the conclusion that I have came to. And even in looking at the history of ADOS, every issue that they've started out sharing, they've flip-flopped on. They started off saying reparations was just about cash payment. After many months of people just saying that cash itself would not repair us as a people, they moved away from that. Then they stated that reparations is only about the wealth gap. If you solve the wealth gap, that's all the reparations we need. And then there's been a lot of push down on that. Now they're open up and saying, no, we had to solve the wealth gap, and we had to do all these other things in criminal justice, education, etc. Then they said that reparations was only for descendants of slaves. And recently, Darity, they've hung all of their hat on him. He's an excellent economist, but a mediocre reparationist at best. they held all of their weight on Darity. He came out and said, well, there were some people who were suffered through Jim Crow. They should also be addressed. And they went totally attacked on him for saying that until he pulled back and said, wow, that was just a test balloon. But you can see that even with that argument, he
didn't really completely pull back. It has there's a breach now between Darity and ADOS, and I don't know if it's if it can be repaired.
Well, he sided with a weak foundation, but that even makes the point that, again, everything that they have put out to be their main pillars of their organization, they have flip-flopped on. But in the process of flip-flopping, they poisoned the minds of hundreds of thousands of our people who would have been assets to us moving further ahead than where we are today if they had not been poisoned by this ADOS rhetoric about from this disinformation that they've been putting out there about the movement. And so I'm clear at this particular point, I have nothing I want to do with ADOS. I'm a revolutionary, so why would I work with an agent?
You're finished with them. I'm
finished with them. I see that there are a lot of people who are breaking away from them. We will work with them if they change their aggressive tactics and come to a willing to have principled dialogue about our differences. We've always been open to principled dialogue. We've always been open to principled struggle within the reparations movement. And if anyone who's a reparationist or wants to get into the movement, has some differences with the Cobra position, we welcome, that dialogue, because in Cobra position is supposed to be the position of the masses. And we cannot be the position of the masses if we have a large contingent who's saying that position is wrong. And so we're not going to get everyone to agree, but we try to represent as many of our people as possible as we fight for the repair of all of our people. And so we need dissenting voices so we can tighten up what it is we're saying, what our people want and what our people need.
So, but you're saying that they've poisoned the minds of people who might normally get interested in the reparations fight. how have they done that? What particular direction? You mean the anti-Pan-Africanist stance that they take?
Well, that and that reparations. Now, if you look at what happened in Evanston, 2 months or a month before this vote, an ADOS element came into and started this group, Reject Racist Reparations. Like, there's no such thing as racist reparations.
That's ADOS sponsored?
They brought in ADOS. When I went to their first public meeting, I saw a slew of ADOS national and local names that I recognize.
Okay.
But they even if they're not ADOS, even if they're not so-called ADOS, their positions were ADOS. Mm-hmm. And this new position that local reparations, they've always said local reparations was not reparations, it has to be national. And that's easily defeated because cities and states have engaged in harms against our communities other than the federal policy that's put down. And they benefit and they still benefit and they have the resources to address it. So that's been put down. But they introduced this new disinformation concept called racist reparations because the $25,000 is going to the banks, and the banks were the ones who engaged in racist practices. Well, there's laws against that at this particular time. But even so, the $25,000 is not going to the banks. That's disinformation. That's a misnomer. The $25,000 is going to the seller of the property. And if the seller owes the bank in above of the $25,000, then the bank may get part of its money back. But that has nothing to do with the city of Evanston and the resources where that money is going. That money is going to the seller who's selling his or her property. And what that seller does...
That's the core of their opposition argument?
That is going to the banks.
Okay.
And so it's racist. The only racist reparations is when slave owners and slavers receive reparations from this country. They felt that they were harmed by public policy, and that's what reparations is supposed to address: harmful government public policy. The enslaver said they were harmed by the freeing of their property, and so they receive reparations. That's racist reparation. But those are type of things where they poison the mind. And the sister who objected to the vote was objecting based on all of these issues that ADOS raised, all of these positions that ADOS raised, which are ludicrous, Brother Salim, if you break them down in their essence. And so that's how they poison the minds, and they continue to poison the minds. I mean, we spent a considerable amount of efforts in Evanston the last few weeks trying to put down this rhetoric that was attempting to block this vote that, again, had tremendous citywide input. I wrote a pamphlet about maybe 8 months ago called Laying the Foundation of Local Reparations. And in that pamphlet, I got from the Evanston website documents that list about 30 issues that the Evanston community stated would be repaired. And it's in that document. I published that 8 months ago, Salim. But they're saying there was no community engagement. There need to be more community engagement. Let's wait. And all of these things entered into the mind of that sister who voted against this legislation. So that's how they're poisoning the minds of people. And again, as Alderman said, that sister was totally in support of not only the reparations resolution, but also in support of housing as a reparations initiative months ago. But all of a sudden, because of this ADOS piece, she's against it. And she utilized that position, which was wrong, of course, in the foundation of her no vote.
So what about the argument, Cam, that these local initiatives devalue the power of reparations as a national strategy? They devalue it because anybody can call what they're doing reparations. And so it has become a word that is carelessly flung around to appease black people who want, a more complete kind of policy direction.
Well, we have to understand that others are going to always, try to pimp the black struggle. we all of our history shows that a lot of people see what we do and then they try to emulate it or weaken it based on bringing others involved. That's just part of being an activist and part of struggling here in America. You're going to get that. But local efforts, and I kind of stated earlier, does not devalue but strengthen our push for federal legislation. Because on the local level, you know, and the alderman really kind of said it best, but she didn't actually say it in the way I'm going to say it, is that you have these disparities in your community that as a legislator, you have the possibility to address, but because fear of race-based whatever, you don't address them. Or you're saying, well, let's wait until the federal resources come down and you don't address them. Why are you there as a legislator? The notion of reparations based on harm to a group in which those harms still exist has to be argued at the point of where the harms are taking place. And that's at the local level. And as you get a collection of that in the local, in one particular city, and another city, and another city, another city, in Chicago, in Peoria, in Waukegan, in Evanston, many cities within the same state, then you can begin to see a state-based harm. And then, of course, state-based harm morph into federal harm. And so we're able to get the actual data of what's going on among Black people on every level of government now based on what is going on the local level. And so what we're doing locally is strengthening, and I can't say that, you know, more emphatically, Salim. What's taking place locally is strengthening. Cities are looking at how segregation, how racial gaps, apartheid, et cetera, harms their Black community in actual dollars and cents. What is the price of segregation in Chicago? What is the national price? There was a study by Citigroup in January that stated, you know, this country would have received $16 trillion in wealth benefit if it had engaged in racial justice 20 years ago. So we know there's a definitive amount of time and possibly a definitive amount of money that can be used to develop a society where we can compete. In a capitalist society, you have to be able to compete, and you have to be able to compete as groups, as races.
And as that study pointed out, it's not a zero-sum relationship, which a lot of white people seem to think. And which Darity, for example, is pretty influential in this kind of what they call stratification economics. And when white people, they resist egalitarian programs because they construe them as benefiting Black people more so than them. And that's what inhibits the development of these kinds of very beneficial programs. And that's really the point that you're making, that this country would benefit if it pursued a program of reparations rather than be hurt by it.
That's exactly right, Salim. And so, you know, this struggle is multifaceted. It has many different battles. It's strategic, it's long-term, it's tactical, you know, and one of the tactical battles we're fighting now is developing more local strategies. One of the tactics is HR 40, federal strategies. But at some point, one of the tactics is going to have to be, and we're preparing that now, as soon as HR 40 is passed or implemented, we think that it can be passed out of the House by June, May out of the judiciary by April or May, and out of the House by June. We believe we're going to have a tough time in the Senate. We're going to pivot. One of the tactics is pivoting after a House victory to a Senate victory. To a presidential executive order for the passage of it. But the minute it's passed,
let's stop on right there, Cam, because you mentioned that before, and I'm really fascinated by the prospect of it being passed by executive order. That is a prospect, that's a constitutional measure that can actually stand.
Oh yeah, the president can. Lincoln approved the 40 acres and a mule through the executive order. Special Field Order number 15 had to be initiated through executive order because Congress did not, enact that. So the president,
That's why
there's
Andrew
been all
Johnson
type of
got rid of it
presidential
so easily, right?
commissions. I'm
So that's
sorry.
why Andrew Johnson got rid of it so easily.
Yeah, because another executive order can come in and wipe it away. But
Right.
the earlier this is done, the commission would be filled, it'd be done, the commission's work would be done during this particular presidency. It only has a 1-year lifespan. And so it could be actually finished before the second year of the Biden presidency. So we have no threat of it being, if it's passed early, that it can be rescinded. So, but that's a fight. We've never got anything in this country, Salim, without fighting. And we've never won anything in this country by being disunited. And so we have, in the movement, laid out strategy. But once the commission is assembled, one of the strategies then has to be where we begin to assemble all of the data that was revealed in that cost of segregation report, in that report by Citigroup, that shows the economic benefit to this country as a result of engaging in racial justice with Black folk. Now, why do we have to make that argument? Because white people are racist. That's it. We have to deal with what we at, but more and more are seeing that they don't have to be, if they're getting some benefit, they will accept, others getting benefit. And that was something that, historically, a white person didn't even want Black blood if it was going to save their life. But,
that's right. That's why they let Black soldiers fight. At one point, they didn't want Negroes with guns. But then when the South was breathing down their necks, they say, okay, Negroes, get some guns. We need help.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right, Salim.
Brother
So
Cam,
we're gonna pivot. We have a lot of strategies. We got to pivot, but we need people. Hey, don't fight against us. Fight against the powers that be that are blocking us. Because once the commission comes back with its proposals, those proposals have to be funded. And if there's an attitude within this country, a predominant attitude in this country, that funding these proposals will benefit this country, those proposals will be funded. And so that's where we have to develop that consciousness, develop that perception in the minds of white, non-allied communities as soon as possible.
Yes. Seems doable, man. I don't think it's that difficult. I mean, the logic seems impeccable. And then one thing I wanted to ask you is that the UN has come to this conclusion a long time ago. The international community, so to speak. Why isn't that much more of a part of the argument that the UN, although for many, I guess that would be a negative. That would be a negative incentive. If the UN likes it, I have to hate it. But the international community has come to a consensus on the need for reparations for African descendants, as you say. That's what they call us, African descendants.
People of African descent, right? So America, it just depends on which executive is in office, or whether or not they pay attention to the UN. And most people don't know that there's 3 UN organs, 3 or 4. There's the Security Council, which, when people say America controls the UN, well, they're really speaking of the Security Council.
That's right.
Where, Americans' influence is so heavy. But then you have the General Assembly, where you have a representative of every government, where they come together and they assemble and they, debate issues that affect the planet. That is more of a democratic type of assembly. Although it's still heavily swayed, the outcomes is heavily swayed by America's either for or against those outcomes. And you have the Human Rights Commission. And it's the Human Rights Commission, which has, as you stated, is the human rights body on the planet who have agreed and who have determined and who have declared that people of African descent were injured, that harm still exists, and it exists in ways that damages their life chances, their chances in life to live a unencumbered a life, no matter where we are on the planet, and that we'll be on, as Todd Burrell, on the bottom of every good list and at the top of every bad list, no matter where we at on the planet. People of African descent share that that sameness and it's a result of the history we suffered in those particular countries. And so that declaration is at the basis of all of our struggle since 2001 at the World Conference Against Racism, where they declared the crimes against humanity and the reparations as an obligation on these countries to address it. But as you know, the United States walked out of that conference.
Correct.
And so we've been having a battle with this country.
And when President Obama was in office, they had a re-up of the conference, right?
A review conference.
And the president still boycotted it. Is that correct?
They had a review conference, and the president still, because reparations was at the bottom, and they knew reparations was at the bottom of that, and that we would come back and be prepared to fight. And we've been fighting, even though the government has not looked favorably at the United Nations recommendations. And so the recommendations there, we have those recommendations. It's up to us internally to utilize those in a way that forces our government to address the harms that have been created. But the United Nations has given us total support in our claim based on the historical harms and the fact that those harms still affect people in their everyday life. And
in fact, that is the logic that you're using in this legal fight against those who claim that a race-based focus is unconstitutional.
And that's illegal. Again, Salim, since 2001, the World Conference Against Racism, people of African descent globally have utilized that conference as a new trajectory, a new paradigm of struggle based on those declarations. And in Brazil, they were the first to come out the box and do some tremendous type of stuff. They instituted a national secretary of race. It's like a cabinet member here in America, like the Secretary of the Defense. They instituted a secretary of race. They had a year-long dialogue around the country. After that dialogue, they engaged in, they created policies for the education, free education, all the way up to the graduate level for people of African descent. They initiated economic development projects. The Quilombo group, Quilombos was like Maroons or outliers. They were called outliers here in America. These were groups that separated themselves from enslavement and created their own communities during enslavement and fought, for that independence and autonomy. And when enslavement ended, they set up their own autonomous governments, like we had Black cities. But some of these groups numbered in the hundreds of thousands, and they created economic development for the Quilombos. And when the new right-wing government came in, they tried to rescind that land that they gave. And one group had gotten like 200 hectares, a million hectares, which is like the size of 3 Chicagos, worth of land. And they tried to rescind it. And this case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, the Brazilian Supreme Court. And about 2 years ago, they were granted that land. The Supreme Court ruled that they have, in fact, right to receive that land, and that land was theirs. So based on, we have test cases internationally utilizing this harm-based, people of African descent-based legal argument. And so when we look outside of the American boundaries, we see that we have significant amount of resources to address what we need to actually make the case for a substantial legal case that we should be repaired.
Yes, sir. And historically, whenever African Americans have gained some ground, it is usually because of international connections and motives that are influential in that. We're going to talk about that, my brother, when we come back. We got a little bit more time with Brother Cam. I want to find out and get as much as I can from this brother, this wealth of knowledge. We'll be back right after this.
WIIFTBPM. WIIFTBP. Media's just for you and me. WIIFTBP. Media's just for you and me.
Introducing your trusted source for high-quality Black emojis, better known as Blackmoji. We believe Black is beautiful, and that beauty should be reflected in the digital market. Now there is an app that does just that, starting with Black Greek letter organizations. Blackmoji D9 offers more than an emoji app. It is a cultural experience of Black excellence. Download the app in the Apple or Google Play Store to access a specially curated catalog of emojis representing the Divine Nine. Use the emojis to celebrate Black Greek events, acknowledge current events, support social causes, and learn about esteemed Black Greek members who blaze the trail of Black history. A portion of every subscription goes toward a scholarship fund.
Hey, I'm sorry. I'm on a Zoom call and I have my phone on silent. Are you here?
Download the Blackmoji app.
Yeah, I'm here. All right, so
What's up,
text me.
everybody? Welcome to the green side of things. It's your man Sadiq.
And Cassiopeia.
Thank you.
And we need you to like,
Comment,
and share
that thing
every Tuesday and Thursday from 1
to 3 p.m. on
What's in it for the Black People Media.
Check, 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 check. Oh, please, don't you rock my boat, 'cause I don't want my boat to be right. Oh, please, don't you rock my boat. Oh, no, 'cause I don't want my boat to be right. I'm telling you just, oh, I like it like this. Keep this just like this. And you should know by now. I like it. I like it like I like it. I like it like I like it. I like it like I like it like this. Yeah. Satisfy my soul. Oh yeah. Satisfy my soul. Every little action satisfy my soul. It's a reaction. Satisfy my soul. Can't you see what you've done for me? Oh yeah, I'm happy inside all of the time. When we bend the new corners, I feel like a sweet six winner. When I meet you around the corner, you make me feel like a sweet steak
And we're
winner.
back in Muwakkil'S world, joined by Brother Sam Trump's rendition of Satisfy My Soul, that Bob Marley classic. He does that one extreme justice as well. Unusual arrangements, but extremely pleasant. Brother Cam, well, by the way, I might have to, I think I'm going to have to get some ADOS people on the show to kind of deal with some of these criticisms, man, because this is pretty hard. This is pretty hard coming from you, Brother Cam. You usually are a lot less, let's say, pugnacious when it comes to ADOS. But that doesn't seem to be the case anymore, my brother.
Well, you look at our history, Salim. A lot of our defeats have been internal because we didn't know who was who. We were working the sides. And so now, we can't say that. We can't say we don't know who's who in this regards. We have the data, we have the research, we have the connection. And so at this particular point, there's nothing else to say or do but to hold them on that side, hold them at bay, and to say who they are. I mean, we have felt the negative effect of their presence nationally, locally, and even in their attempt to halt the first initiative in Evanston. And so, Salim, this is what I've given my life to, and that's the redress for over 600 years of crimes against our people. I can't, move forward and not be telling our people the truth about a force within our community that we now know has motives that are not in line with moving our position forward, but retarding it. And so that's why I'm speaking the way I am at this time, Salim.
Okay. That I understand, my brother. I understand. I have to read that Harvard study to be convinced of this finding that they are indeed negative agents put in. Because I mean, there were accusations of that from the get-go, like because Russia was trying to exploit these varied ideological divisions in the black community, and they were extremely aware of how dense these divisions were, having experience with the black movement from when the Soviet Union was involved in the 60s. They knew how to exploit the divisions between the nationalists and the so-called revolutionary nationalists at that time. So they have a great reservoir of intelligence on how to deal with that. So there were accusations of that from the get-go. But as I say, the ADOS logic is, I think, pretty good. I think that some of the opposition was, the fact that there are new kids on the block, and that new kids on the block always provoke opposition, and so they have to come hard too, because they have to show that they ain't no punk in this, and establish their grounding. So that's what I attributed it to. But I have to check out this Harvard study that you point to get some more definitive data from big data, because that's an important thing.
So you say the logic of ADOS is pretty good. I think you're referring to, and you can correct me, that the redress should be targeted toward people who were enslaved from descendants of enslaved from Africa, and that recent immigrants should not be included.
Yes, I think there's an argument for a specific justice claim for African Americans because of the unique plantation socialization that occurred, the way it took away our cultural capital in ways that were very unique from other parts of the diaspora. And I think that we are an ethnic iteration of that diaspora with specific needs that are distinguishable from needs of other folks who were socialized in other systems. I mean, there were Catholic systems of slavery which were different from the Anglican systems, the Latinate systems. There were systems where there were large groups of Africans available in the population, and so they maintain a lot of their Africanisms, their cultural traits that enable them to deal with slavery in different ways. And I think the African Americans, those who were socialized by the plantation system, were subjected to a unique form of socialization. And I think we have to observe that and acknowledge that in the way we design repair for our justice claims.
So Salim, we're 100% in agreement with that. There's never been any disagreement with that in Cobra. And that's part of the disinformation, that we want reparations. We want the federal government to pay reparations to all Black people in America, no matter where they come from, for slavery reparations, for slavery era crimes. That has never been the case within Cobra. We have stated that has never been the case for years to the ADOS leadership. When I'm speaking of ADOS, I'm talking about their leadership and the ideology that their leadership is passed down into the masses, who are maybe unaware of the intention and motive. I know people who have held the ADOS claim and identity, who I respect and will work with, because I know where they are heart-wise. But the notion that we were anywhere against what you just laid out, Salim, is disinformation.
Okay.
What Cobra distinguishes is that there were 3 periods of harms in this government.
Oh, let me just state, I never construed that as being in opposition to Cobra, quite myself. So,
well, you were saying the logic. Okay, all right. So, yeah, but that logic has always been there. But that's not the basis of their, that is one of the bases of their disinformation, but there are other aspects of the disinformation, which I talked about earlier. But Cobra always held that this government must address people who are descendants of Africans enslaved in the U.S. for the period of harms that we've inherited, that our ancestors went through that particular period. This government also must address descendants of Africans people of African descent, and their descendants who came to this country post-enslavement, who were also harmed by this government via convict leasing, lynching, underemployment, all of those crimes of Jim Crow, segregation, etc. If they were here during that particular time and they were harmed by this government, and their descendants are here today, they should be redressed for that period of harms. And then you have the third period, Salim, which is the post-Jim Crow period, 1965 to today. If there's redress specifically, and there should be redress for each of these periods, the bulk of the redress should be for the redress for enslavement and those who had ancestors who were enslaved in this country. That's the bulk of any federal reparations plan. But you also have to consider harms done to people, Black people, people of African descent, who came after enslavement ended. For instance, Amadou
Diallo in New York.
Diallo, who was sodomized by the New York Police Department. His brother, Botham, who was murdered in his house eating ice cream. These are post-Jim Crow crimes. And if people came to this country and were harmed by this country post-Jim Crow, and even if it wasn't them or one of their parents, they deserve to be redressed. But for enslavement, the only people who's going to be redressed for enslavement in this country is people whose ancestors were enslaved in this country. There's never been any contention, any disagreement with that. And no matter how many times we try to explain this in that degree, they will still come back and say, Cobra wants Caribbeans to be paid, governments to pay Caribbeans for enslavement, or people from South America for enslavement. So that part of that disinformation is to create these divisions where there weren't any divisions, Salim.
Yes, sir. I think there may be some confusion because they would say that, the Caribbeans came here on their own. They immigrated on their own. They didn't go through the same process that enslaved Africans went through. And so it was a voluntary migration that accounts for them being here and subjected to those things. They could have stayed home and not be subject. That's a cruder and less charitable way that they would put it. But yeah, I mean, that's some of the.
So that's saying if we go visit some other country, we should just be treated any type of way also and have no redress.
Very good point. Very good.
I mean,
point,
they're illogical, Salim. If you look at it on the face, because they came here voluntarily, they were injured, and we say that if you come here on your own and our government do something to you, you have no redress because you came here on your own.
Yes, sir.
That doesn't make any sense either.
It doesn't make sense, and in fact, the Evanston ordinance makes that clear. In fact, because there could have been some people from the Caribbean who came here in 1919 and then suffered that particular discrimination, and they would still be eligible for reparations according to the ordinance in Evanston. So yeah, you're right. It does make a difference in that way. But there's another thing though, the accrued disadvantages of enslavement. Let's say it handicapped African Americans from being able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps as Caribbean people do. For example, look at Cambrian Heights in New York City, in Queens, where there's this very, very wealthy black suburb, black community in Queens, Cambria Heights, which is primarily Caribbean American. And one of the reasons why they've been able to accrue this kind of wealth is because they come with a kind of cultural capital that African Americans don't have because of enslavement. They come here and are able to progress and step over African Americans in their way to the American dream because they have that cultural capital that has been denied to African Americans.
Well, I can disagree and agree with that also, Salim. Of course, generally when it comes to most Africans who come to America, they come from an elite group of Africans who went to elite schools. They outcompete not only Black Americans, but white Americans, Europeans, Chinese, and Asians in SAT tests. They're the highest scoring group who come to this country to go to school, and it's because of that elite neo-capitalist structure or neo-colonial structure there, which gives them this competitive advantage. And in a capitalist society, they don't care what color you are. At some levels, they're going to hire you or they're going to bring you in a position. So that's a class, really a class argument as opposed to a race argument. And the same thing with the Capitol Heights, Camden Heights, I think it was. That's more of a class argument. We have created independent, strong, viable, independent economic communities in this country, but other policy has came in, public policy, to destroy those communities. So to say that they come with cultural capital that we didn't have, we had that cultural capital. We've abandoned it with the attempt to integrate into America, abandoning our strong economic base via integration. So what we're seeing is not a lack of cultural capital, but more a forgetting of that cultural capital that we once had.
Well, you're right. We've been forbidden from accumulating it because of the barriers of American racism. But those barriers are specific, the argument goes, and has crippled us in ways that it hasn't crippled others. And so they have an advantage. Like, for example, they come here. There's a lot of discussion now, for example, about the prevalence of diasporan Africans and playing movie roles of prominent African Americans, and that they are in fact reaping the benefits that African Americans have protested for, and is somehow unfair. There's that argument going on, and this is similar to the kind of argument that you hear people make against African immigrants. You say there's nothing to that, or how do you respond to those arguments?
I say that I definitely see that. I definitely see immigrant Africans in higher positions than a lot of Black Americans. I think that it's more of a racist, class-based argument, and one that should be targeted not at immigrants, but at this government or at the Screen Actors Guild or whoever is discriminating in that fashion. That's where the fight should be. It should not be a fight against those who are benefiting, unless they're benefiting in a way that they're purposely excluding Black people or working to purposely exclude Black people. But it is the policymakers, it is those who are controlling the hiring, controlling the casting, where the fight should be. Not against people of African descent who, some of them deserve to be educated in this fashion and deserve to be chastised if that's what they're actually doing, colluding with the discrimination. But I think the fight should be against those who are discriminating. That's been my struggle for since I got in the struggles to fight those who are doing the harm.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, okay. Another angle in this thing, and especially with the Evanston effort, is the funding vehicle, cannabis taxes. That's an extremely clever and symmetrical way to accumulate funding for these kinds of programs. Do you think that logic, for example, can be expanded nationally as well?
I think a lot of cities are trying to do that because, a lot of cities and states are trying to do that because it's a novel revenue source. They don't have to, raise taxes or create, a specific revenue source or extract from an existing revenue source. So I think that in that regards, that other cities should utilize that model. But I don't want to, say that that's the only way that they can fund it. I know in Kansas City, they did an initiative. They didn't call it reparations, but it was for a district that was 97% Black. It was an economic development tax. They put 1/8 of a percent tax on everyone, 1/8 of 1% of 1 cent tax on everyone for economic development in that community. There's, if we have to tax, if we do a luxury tax, if we have to tax, we can, I think that that's a way also. So we shouldn't limit it to a new revenue stream. We just have to, if that can be done, certainly it should be done.
The thing that makes it compelling, more than its novelty, is the fact that it is connected to our degradation. That really
exactly
the root to our to the devaluing of our community is through the criminal justice system, and that was really the war on drugs that led to that, and the anti-reefer attitude that got so many of us locked up is really the culprit in this. So there's symmetry.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that that's the specific revenue that this government is taking part of receiving, as that at one time they criminalized and over-criminalized our community in that regard. So I think Alderman Simmons said that 77% of Black arrests for marijuana possession were arrests for marijuana possession were Blacks, even though in the city it's proven that Blacks and whites use marijuana at the exact same rate. And if you have 70% population utilizing, engaging in a crime, and you have 17% engaging in a crime, you would think that 70% would have more arrests than the 17%, but it was actually the opposite. And so that was race-based.
And I think that increased the power of her argument, of the reparations argument, was that particular imbalance.
The power of the funding. They had approved the reparations subcommittee before they approved the funding.
Okay.
And so their first effort was to get the reparations subcommittee. So in various cities, most people are utilizing the HR 40 model, which is first pass the law to have the committee or commission done, second, develop the proposals, third, fund the proposals. With Evanston, they first passed the law to develop this reparations subcommittee. Then in November of 2019, I had the opportunity to go and give public comment. They passed the law to actually fund. So they funded first, and then yesterday was the first proposal. So it's an entirely different model where the funding comes before the proposal. In HR 40 in most cities, Chicago, the proposals come before the funding. So this is novel, and I think that that's a way in which, dollars are already committed, and then the people just have to prioritize their repair with those dollars. So, yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the California effort, my brother, but we've run out of time. And so I have to say, man, I absolutely appreciate you, Brother Cam, man. You've been a wealth of knowledge on this issue, and I don't think we could have ever found someone with that kind of comprehensive knowledge on the issue of reparations. So thank you, brother. Appreciate you. I want to bring you back again. We got things to talk about.
As I always say, brother, I was well trained And I stand on the shoulders of ancestors and those teachers.
Yes, sir. Indeed. Thank you, Brother Cam. Thank you, family. You've been in Muwakkil'S world with some wonderful folks today, and I hope you got something out of it, as I have. So until the next time, peace.
WIIFTBPM